And I think that's a great cautionary tale. And it makes us realize that this is not an unlimited source of power that will always be in your favor, but there must be some ways that we can be conscious of if we're stepping over the boundary, things that we can work on to minimize the downside. I feel like this whole movement around personal growth has a lot to do with, acknowledging the subconscious, integrating it, listening to it. But I'm sure that, a lot of other practices, as Elvis has been telling you, ignore that. It's just noise. Focus on success. Keep moving forward. If you have any doubts, just move forward and ignore it. Hustle, hustle, hustle. Seems like there's a bit of friction there, but you united in your material. And I think you have a more approach towards integration here.
Yeah. There's a saying, God helps those who help themselves. And so there's nothing wrong with hustle, hustle, hustle. But I think that you have to acknowledge that your efforts on their own are not going to take you to the finish line. You really need the things that you don't have control over. You need charisma. You need the ability to connect with other people. And you need what we call luck. But sometimes luck is just pure random chance, but usually it's not. Fortune favors the bold, as it said. And that's not always true. Sometimes fortune favors the cautious. But the bottom line is that it's not random chance, that there are things going on. And so I think the first step in making the unconscious an ally is to put aside the arrogance that many of us have, that we are in complete control in our brain. That we're the only ones up there. And we have to start acknowledging that there are forces we don't control, forces that affect our emotions, our intuitions, our inspirations, forces that affect our desires. We hustle, hustle, hustle to get the things we want, but we don't choose those things that we want. And a lot of times the things that we want are bad for us. They're self-destructive. And we go, oh my God, I wish I didn't want this person. I wish I didn't want this thing because it's so horrible for me, but we have no control. So the first step is to get better at separating those two things. The things we do have control over and the things in which we are just a passive rider. To pay attention to it. In psychology, the technical term for it is the observing ego. We take a step back and we look at what's happening.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to elaborate on that because if we understand that we are not fully in control, but there's certain things we do want to keep the reins on. And what I love in the opening chapters in your book, you talk a lot about how we need to actually use our conscious mind. It's very useful to filter some of the noise that'll come from the unconscious because it's not all good advice. Some of it isn't that great. So we need to be able to discern what's in our best favor, such as, well, I'd love to hit that snooze button, but I want to get up and I know this is good for me and these are habits I want to build. I would think this is an example of control, but I'd love to ask from you, what are some of the things, your practices of control that are the most useful for someone who wants to operate at a high performance, have more success, and build a company without necessarily, crash and burning in the process?
Yeah. So, I've referred to the unconscious a couple of times as instinct. Human beings are this weird combination of the rational and the irrational, the spiritual and the animal. We've got both of these things, and they don't always work in harmony, but we need to try to do that. And the unconscious is the animal side of the human being. It's the instinct. And so I think one way to help us understand it is to think of a real animal. Think of the relationship between a person and a wild horse. That wild horse is going to be very, very dangerous and not particularly useful. But if the human being takes the time and the trouble to tame that wild horse, it will be an incredibly powerful ally. In the days before automobiles, you could travel. In wartime, a war horse was a very powerful weapon and a huge advantage. And so if you can tame this wild animal, make it a partner, it becomes a very, very powerful tool. It's not an easy thing to do. And so what we want to do is use our conscious mind to try to tame this wild, instinctual unconscious within us. And we do that by making the unconscious conscious. We pay attention to what's going on, and we try to open up the channels of communication. We pay attention to our emotions. We allow ourselves to fully feel the emotions, even the bad ones like anger and hatred and envy and jealousy, but we don't allow them to take over our behavior. We feel 100%, but we don't allow it to act. In order to do that, you need a strong conscious mind. You need a strong ego, as we say it. And so the best thing you can do is do things that strengthen your ego. Have some discipline. Try to think about your values and stick to them. So the alarm goes off, you hit the snooze button, you're giving in to the horse's instinct. No, you need to train the horse. Don't hit the snooze button. Get out of bed, strengthen your discipline, strengthen your conscious mind. That will enable you to develop this productive relationship with your unconscious.